It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast as we work towards Christmas and the New Year break. Talking your property news. We're doing that 7 days a week. And if you are wondering what is going to happen to us over the break, we will still be here every morning from 6 a.m. with the summer series of real estate. Now, if you're a new listener, particularly a first home buyer, this is great for you because it delves into all of the great content that we had throughout the year, talking to all of these professional real estate people, including economists. So that will be kicking off in a few days' time. It is a Thursday morning, December the 19th. A home in Marawa, Western Australia, not sure if you caught up on this news, may have just set a record as Australia's cheapest property sale. How much did it sell for? $2,000 at auction. The rundown house sits on 1,012 square metres and had the words before you entered the property, enter at your own risk due to its crumbling condition. The property was one of three auctioned to clear council rate debts. Despite asbestos, collapsed ceilings and rusted gutters, of course it didn't put people off. If you're only paying $2,000, and the local agent called it an historic moment in his 35-year career, capturing, he says, the essence of affordable property sales in regional Australia. I think he's got a sense of humour, the local agent there. Let's catch up with somebody else who's always up for a bit of banter, and that is Matthew Hughes from Capital Property Advisory there in Perth for a look at the local market. And good morning to you, Matthew. That's a great little story. $2,000. The house is yours as well as 1,012 square metres of land.
Yeah, it's look, $2,000 you can't complain with, but I dare say the council rate debts were probably more than that. The buyer's done pretty well at $2,000, but it's obviously at that price because no one else wants it.
You just land banked that, for a couple of years. You're bound to triple your price, I would think. All right, well, let's have a look at the Perth property market, which has, unlike this particular area, seen very impressive growth for 2024, leading the nation with over 20% annual price growth. So, boy, oh boy, this has been such a big story for 2024. And what are the key drivers behind this performance, do you think, for the year?
Perth's affordability relative to the other capitals has always been a significant driver of demand in this cycle. And so we've attracted a lot of strong interstate and overseas migration because of that. And while we saw the rate of growth peak sort of middle to or just after the middle of this year, the market's now starting to cool as affordability constraints come into play, especially at the lower price points. Those lower price points have been really the driver of the outperformance in Perth to this date in this cycle. I think Perth still offers a compelling value proposition compared to cities like certainly Sydney, but even Melbourne, Brisbane and Adelaide. And that's keeping demand pretty robust moving into next year, albeit at lower levels than what we've seen over the last 12 months.
Yes, so despite worsening affordability, Perth is still seen as relatively manageable compared to other cities. So how does Perth's affordability, do you think, stacks up nationally?
While affordability has obviously declined with the excessive growth that we've had, obviously wages can't keep pace with that level of growth. Perth still remains in the middle of the pack in terms of dwelling to income ratios, given WA incomes are the second highest in the country, and they're sitting up there ahead of New South Wales and trailing only the ACT. Whereas cities like Adelaide, with a higher median price than Perth and the second worst incomes, and in areas like obviously Sydney at very high price points, face far greater affordability challenges than what we do here. So this balance has allowed Perth to retain its appeal for investors, home buyers as well, and renters as well. I guess you throw them into the mix, even in the face of that ongoing housing cost increase. And then moving across and looking at the other states, I think Victoria sits above New South Wales in terms of incomes too, but is far more affordable than New South Wales. And I think that's part of the reason why there's been the increased activity from first home buyers there. And now moving into that investor market, we're starting to see a lot more investment activity there of late. And I expect that to continue into next year.
And with the annual house rents increasing by 9.4%, Perth's rental market still remains, doesn't it, very much incredibly tight. So let's have a look at just some of those challenges that renters are facing currently in the environment.
Yeah, renters are definitely feeling the pinch at all price points. Even though rental price growth has moderated significantly after a stellar period of growth, and I'm exposed to it myself at the moment. We're doing a big renovation and extension of our home, and we're renting at the moment. We've experienced a number of increases already and expect that to probably continue into next year at that higher price point. At the beginning of this cycle, the median house rental price, most people have probably forgotten this, was only $350 per week. Obviously very low comparative to the rest of the country, and now sits at nearly double that at $670. Vacancy rates have doubled in the past year, and whilst they're slightly higher, they're still sitting at 1.2%, so they're still very low, and that's maintaining a level of fairly intense competition for good rental properties. But the times of being able to get a good rent for a very inferior property, they're really behind us now, and they're starting to normalise in terms of what you can achieve for a subpar property. The affordability pressures have led to creative solutions in the market, so we've seen a lot of renters starting to share larger households and rent rooms or multi-generational living setups, and that's helping people amortise those costs and reduce cost of living pressures for those in need.
Okay, all right. We're talking to Matthew Hughes, our man on the ground in Perth. And when we come back, we're going to have a look at just what is happening with the investor activity and look ahead to that year that is fast approaching, 2025. We'll do that after this.
From buying strategies, a fluctuating market, the importance of data, geographical differences, confidence in the market, rental yields. Stay informed every morning from 6 a.m. The Real Estate Podcast wishes you and your family a fantastic Christmas break and a happy new year ahead.
You almost couldn't buy property in certain areas on the peninsula because they were so tightly held. Your Point Leos and Shorehams and Merricks, they're just passed down from family member to family member. But with land tax, if people aren't making the most of the properties, I'm finding that there's a really heightened level of properties on the market because of that.
What about the investors just selling part of their stock? They just cannot make the numbers work with the land tax, with everything else.
There's such an opportunity at the moment, is my gut feel. So if I was going to be buying and selling, I think it's such a good time to do it because we are in a low market. If you're buying and selling right now, you're paying less stamp duty, you're paying less agents' fees, and there's abundance of stock on the market as well.
Every week we present so much real estate. Powerful, up-to-date news every morning from 6 a.m. Know your property with us on the Real Estate Podcast.
And it is a Real Estate Thursday into the wind down. Looking forward to Christmas morning, waking up with your friends and family. I know that you, Matthew, certainly are looking forward to Christmas Day. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But first, let's focus on the investor activity in Perth, which has slowed, but I think fair to say remains still quite strong, while nationally investor activity is up 30%. So where are investors focusing right at the moment, and where might their interest shift, do you think, in 2025?
Yeah, look, several factors I think have kept Perth in play for investors, even as the rate of growth has begun to soften. So we've definitely seen a decrease in the amount of East Coast investor activity, but it hasn't disappeared. It's probably down for us anecdotally about 40% from maybe 6 months ago. We're continuing to see strong demand for investors, be it locally or interstate, because we've still got the best rental yields of all the four major capitals in the country, and we've got an investor-friendly policy environment. I've seen pretty high levels of activity in other areas like regional Queensland in 2024. Areas like Townsville and Ipswich and even Mackay and Rockhampton have been getting a lot of attention. However, our policy with regional markets has always been that you need to get in early or not at all, because they can be quite erratic with their ups and downs. and you want to make sure you're capturing a full growth cycle if you're going into an area and taking on a disproportionate amount of potential downside risk like that we feel that most regional markets represent. But given the growth that's already taken place in these areas, I'd encourage people to probably avoid them. And then moving into next year, I expect to see a continued gravitation towards Victoria. There's a lot of savvy investors that making counter-cyclical plays and getting in there now to beat the competition to the punch, knowing full well that you might be sitting on a property that's slightly declining or stagnating for the next 3 or 6 or 9 months or whatever it may be. But if you're buying well, that initial growth that you're not getting is sort of baked into the purchase price if you execute it well. And then when we see rates drop next year, I think it'll sort of arrest that slide and probably kick Victoria back into gear, albeit at a moderate rate. I think Victoria next year is also going to benefit from a general lack of good options for investors around the country, as most markets that people would typically invest in are approaching or are already at the pointy end of their upward swing.
Yeah, so that's going to be interesting just to see how that all unfolds with the investor market, with what you're talking about. I think what we should do is probably have a look at the 2025 year overall for the Perth property market next year. What are your thoughts here as we sort of close down 2024 and look ahead to what might unfold?
My prediction for next year is growth on the median. It'll continue to moderate, and I think it will fall somewhere between 7 and 10% next year. There's a couple of variables that might influence that. Obviously, rates being one, and then APRA potentially softening that serviceability buffer could have it outperform those numbers. And I think a lot of the growth and the outperformance is going to be in the middle and upper pricing sectors, as opposed to the lower quartile where we've seen the demand and the growth sort of driving the market from the bottom up over the last couple of years in Perth. It's going to start to move up through the market, that demand, and I think the price growth will move along with it. And then an increase that we've seen, that we've spoken about previously in new dwelling starts, they've increased to pretty decent levels now, still not feeding the market what we need in terms of creating a balanced market again. But as migration begins to soften a little bit, we're still leading the country in terms of migration and population growth at 2.8%, but that is softening, and I think that will eventually play a role in this slowdown. But the new dwelling stock that we're seeing all the approvals for now is unlikely to impact the overall stock levels much until 2026, given how long it takes to get something out of the ground and completed. I'd also expect that the increased appetite for new construction that we're seeing at the moment will moderate, which I predicted sort of 3 to 6 months ago with you. And I think that'll delay the return back to those balanced stock levels as people start to realise how much costs and timeframes are starting to blow out again. And I saw an article last week, I think the headline was something along the lines of Perth building costs skyrocket. And that's something that I'm seeing from talking to my builder personally and a couple of projects that we're working on. They are heading in the wrong direction again, and quite quickly. Brickies are already charging now more than what they were peak COVID times. And the availability of trades is looking very bleak moving into next year. So those timeframes are really going to start to blow out again, unfortunately.
So there's a little bit of a prediction for 2025. Matthew, we will not be talking between now and Christmas or now and the new year. You've done a great job once again. You've been on the podcast for coming up 2 years. And no mean feat to be right across any one market. So well done for that. And have yourself a fantastic Christmas. I know that is going to be a very big affair with your children in the Hughes household on Christmas morning.
Yeah, they're already very excited. As you know, they're coming up on 3 and 5, so they're right into all of the Christmas stuff, and they're looking forward to seeing what Santa brings them. And it's going to be a really good time with us hosting the family at our house this year. And Craig, all the best to you as well, mate. I really appreciate all the times we've had to catch up this year and talk through what's been happening in a very interesting year in the Perth market. So thank you, and all the best to you and your family for Christmas and New Year as well.
Yeah, thanks for that. And we're looking forward to 2025. Bring it on.
From first-time home buyers to seasoned investors to breaking property news, discover the stories behind the real estate. We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.